Hi everyone, welcome back. So we're gonna be working on writing and solving two-step equations, and we're gonna be solving the equations using inverse operations. Okay. So again, our goal for today is to solve two-step equations using inverse operations, making use of the let statement, and writing equations that represents the problem. But before we move forward, I want you to remember what are the things that is required for you to do this. So you're going to write an equation based on the end value or the value that is in the problem. You're going to write a let statement. You're going to use inverse operation to solve the problem. And I want you to circle your final answer and don't forget the units of measure in the problem. For the first question, Desiree made 100 cookies this week. She baked 4 more than 3 times the total she made last week. So how many cookies did she bake last week? You could pause this video and work on the problem. We could start by writing a let statement, right? So, or whatever statement you want to do. So, but in this case, how many cookies did she bake last week? So our let statement, so I could just say let's see, because we're looking for the number of cookies that she baked. So how many cookies did she bake? So number of cookies. So we could do that, right? So and then we could write an equation that represents the problem. So in this case, you said Desiree made 100 cookies this week. So we could usually end up with 100, correct? Like that. But what happened to figure out to go to the 100? What is the equations that we could like represent? So she baked 4 more than 3 times. 4 more than 3 times. So we could usually write 3c because it's 3 times the number of cookies plus 4 more. So we could say 3c plus 4 is 100. And since I asked you to solve this using inverse operation, we could just subtract 4 in both sides of equation, right? So using inverse operation reverses the problem, the equations, right? So now here we could write 3c. And here 4 minus 4 is 0, so we don't really have to write that down, 0. So and then 100 minus 4 gives you 96. And then we divide both sides by 3 to isolate the variable, which is letter C. So 3 divided by 3 gives you 1. And the factor that remains is C, or we could say 1C. Then 96 divided by 3, you could do your simple mathematical operation. So that's gonna give us 32. What is this 32 now? We could say that there are 32 cookies. Spelling cookies baked last week. Right? So how many cookies did she bake last week? So she got 22 cookies baked last, and then say last week. All right? So there you go for problem number 1. Problem number 2. Shakira went bowling with her friends. She paid $3 to rent the shoes, and then she paid $4.75 for each game in the bowling. If she spent a total of $21, how much games did Shakira bowl? So how much game do you think she was able to play? So let's see how this is gonna work. So you guys could stop and then solve it and then forward it later. But in this case, we could just say, since our question is how many games did Shakira play? So let G, number of games. Then we could write the equation that represents that scenario that we have. She said that she paid $3 plus 475 each game. So I could say G, and then she spent 21. So let's see how many games she was able to play. And then the next step we're gonna have is -3, because that's plus, or then -3 both sides to isolate the variable, so that we need 2 steps to isolate it. So we end up here with 4.75G, and then we got 21 minus 3, gonna be 18. And then we divide both sides by 4.75, because that is the amount or the fee for each game in 4.75. And then we could cancel it out, but it's equivalent to 1. So now the G, if you use your magical tool, will be 18 divided by 4.75 will give us 3.78. So question is, how many games did Shakira play? Can she play 4 games? The answer is no, because she doesn't have enough money to pay for 4 games. So she only were able to play 3 games, because she doesn't have that much money to play for another game. Okay, so even though this is gonna be rounded up to 3.78, could be rounded up to 4, but then unless you get discount, then you could play 4 games, but she doesn't have enough money to play for 4 games. She only could play 3 games. All right, so sometimes rounding off doesn't make sense in some problem. It depends on what the problem is. In this case, she doesn't have enough money to play for 4, because it's 3.78 and she only paid 21. Maybe she could play, if she added more money for that, she could play 4 games. So she was able only to play 3 games. Next question. This year, Cornell's class took more than 3 times as many field trips as last year's class. So this year, Cornell's class took a total of 7 trips. How many trips did his class take last year? So we could do a let statement again. So let's say this is a trip. So we could say let T equals how many field trips did the class take last year. So field, you could say field trips, and you could say last year. Just make sure that was for last year's field trip. And what equation can we make? Like, if you look at the problem, it says 1 more than 3 times the field trip. So we could just write something that says 1 more than 3 times. So you could say 3T, 3 times the field trip last year, and we have 1 more. Alright, and then it says this year took 7 trips. So you put 7 here. And since I asked you to solve this using inverse operation, that's plus, so you put -1 both sides. And then we could just say 3T, 1 minus 1 is 0, we don't need to write that. And then 7 minus 1 gives you 6. So to isolate 3 times T, we divide both sides by 3. So to get only T, isolating it to make it 1. So therefore our answer is T equals 6 divided by 3 is 2. What is that 2 now? Field trips last year. So you could just say that is the number of field trips they have done last year. If you want to go back and check, so that's 3 times last year. So 3 times 2 plus 1 is 7. So with that, our answer is correct. Next problem. Again, so the problem sounds like this. This week, Jamira, that's a nice name, spent a total of 100 minutes studying. This total was 8 more than 4 times the amount of minutes she studied last week. How many minutes did Jamira spend studying last week? So our let statement, we could say let S, because that is studying. You know that you could write the entire question in your let statement. So, or you could just shortcut it. Minutes. Jamira studied. Jamira studied. And that was last week. Okay, doesn't fit. But we could extend this. There we go. Now we could write the equation that represents the problem. So let's say this week Jamira spent the total of 100. So I could usually get from the equation that we have, right? What happens to get 100? What scenario is there? So there is 8 more than 4 times the amount of minutes. So 8 more. So 8 more means plus 8. And it says 4 times the amount of minutes. So you could just say 4s because we're using s minutes Jamira used. By the way, some of you might write this 8 plus 4s equals 100. It's definitely okay. What property is being used to that? 8 plus 4s is 4s plus 8. You always learn that's a commutative property of addition. So now we subtract both sides by 8. Oops, let's subtract and both sides by 8. So now we could have 4s. I'm gonna make it s before it looks like 5. Then 100 minus 8 gonna give you 92, right? And then, what is the next step? We divide both sides by 4. And using your magical tool that I asked you to bring all the time, 4 divided by 4 is 1, so we're gonna have 1s. And 92 divided by 4, with your mental power and your magical tool, which is calculator, gives you 23. And 23 is what? 23 what? 23 minutes. You always have to remember your units of measure. And what is that 23 minutes? That is how much Jamira studied last week. Not even want to double check if you get right. So 23 times 4 plus 8, that gives you 100. Alright, so I hope you learn how to write an equation based on the scenario that is given to you, a real world problems that is given to you. And your task will be in your Google Classroom. Want to check your Google Classroom for your task for today. And if you have question, you could always go back to the slides that we had. I hope to take a screenshot of every problem we had. Alright? Okay, good luck to your work, and I will see your work later. If there is some confusion, you could always ask me. Alright? Bye for now. See you guys later. Bye-bye.